In New York City, at the Canal Street subway station, a group of citizens are accosted by a gang calling themselves the Golden Tigers. A police officer attempts to intervene, only for the gang to viciously attack the officer. Fortunately for him, Iron Fist is on the scene, with a flurry of blows so fast the human eye can barely perceive it. Iron Fist is able to deftly attack the Golden Tiger gang. Unfortunately, before he can finish the gang off, he is distracted by a passing subway train. The final member of the gang is able to use this opportunity to kick Iron Fist straight into the moving train, knocking him down and stunning him, while those leaving the train as it arrives in the station are able to distract Iron Fist enough that he loses track of the Golden Tigers, and they are able to make their escape. The police arrive at the scene, blocking a kid named Peter Parker from taking photos, even though he is on assignment for the Daily Bugle. His companion, Mary Jane, insists that that's not the case. He just happened to stumble on the crime scene while they were supposed to be on a date. Danny Rand is treated by the authorities, who are thankful for his help in intervening on the scene. Thanks to one of the citizens being an artist, he was able to recreate the image the gang wore of their symbol, and the police are confident they'll be able to catch these gang members by the end of the night. One of the onlookers to the whole scene, a man named Bill Howe, is not so convinced. No matter how hard the police seem to try, they are unable to keep the Golden Tigers behind bars. This leaves Bill and his Army Ranger training as the only one who can stop this vicious gang from further committing violence against the people of New York. But Bill has a very personal reason for wanting to destroy their tigers. Their leader is Robert Howe, his brother. He finds a woman named Cynthia Wu sneaking down Pell Street, and knows that she belongs to the Tigers' female auxiliary. Bill is able to follow her to the meeting of the Golden Tigers. They swear they will stop anyone from seizing their tight control over New York City, including the dealer Ward Meacham and his niece Joy, and most especially Iron Fist. As Bill looks on, he is approached by an unseen figure. Back home, Danny Rand reflects on recent events. It's strange to him returning to the house he grew up in, as so much has changed since he last stayed here. Nothing makes sense anymore. Master Khan accused UT of plotting his parents' murder, and UT didn't deny it. And meanwhile, his memories of his childhood haunt him as he walks through the family home. The next morning, Joy Meacham has a meeting with her family's contact, a man named Davos. She's worried about a number of shady dealings her uncle was involved in, including something involving a gang in Chinatown and a radiation researcher in France. She wants Davos to check these things out and determine whether or not they're all illegal, though Davos comments he's not her errand boy. Joy remarks that's true, he's a murderer who's sworn to kill Iron Fist, and she's sworn to help him. But until that day comes, he's promised to serve her, so she demands that he stop arguing and start to serve. Joy reflects that she's starting to become more and more like her father, and it's only a matter of time before Uncle Ward is dealt with. She reassures herself that she is in control of the situation, and it's time to make some changes. Danny Rand meets up with his lawyer and Misty Knight as they have a meeting today at the Meacham building. Unknown to them, the Golden Tigers are also heading there to complete a mission. Danny is meeting with Joy to discuss his return to New York City. Though he was thought dead, his lawyer insists that they will be getting what rightfully belongs to the young man. However, the meeting is interrupted by the Golden Tigers, who burst in and attack. With Danny Rand caught red-handed, he's unable to transform into Iron Fist and face these foes. Misty Knight reaches for a gun, but Danny's lawyer insists that she resists the urge. The Golden Tigers' leader says that they will concede to his demands, or one by one, every person here will die. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my recap and review of Iron Fist number 8. So, in our random draw of Mary Jane related comics, we have stumbled across a true side series cameo in a storyline that really doesn't have much to do with Mary Jane or Peter Parker at all, but happily features them both in a single panel, as they are there to observe the crime scene that unfolds at the beginning of this story. That's okay, I knew this was going to potentially happen when we went into the story, and that's kind of part of the fun. Mary Jane's appearances in these comics might range from small single-panel cameos such as this, to much more robust appearances where she plays a huge part in the story, as we're likely to see going forward. This comic is a pretty interesting one though, and I have to say it's pretty cool to be reviewing it. This is from the Iron Fist series that really was Iron Fist's first solo debut in a series of his own, with the character having only been premiered in 1973 and this comic having come out in 1976. This is a pretty recent character, and already he's showing some really interesting colors. Going into this comic, I knew I was in for a real treat because one doesn't approach a comic written by Chris Claremont and with art by John Byrne and not expect something truly and utterly amazing. Especially a comic that I hadn't have read yet, and I hadn't read any of this Chris Claremont Iron Fist series. I have been missing out though, because this comic is a lot of fun, and man, did I enjoy this thing from start to finish. What's really interesting about this is it feels a lot like a version of the Iron Fist show in season 1 that would have worked. A lot of the same plot elements being floated around in issue 8, mostly the larger ongoing plot lines, heavily resemble what we saw in Iron Fist season 1, with Danny Rand having returned to New York after years away in Kunlun learning to become the Iron Fist, and him challenging the Meachums for control over his company. And the overall dynamic behind this series feels a lot like what season 1 of Iron Fist was based on. Except, everything works in this comic book that didn't in the show. It's almost hard to describe other than the fact that it can easily be attributed to the fact that Chris Claremont wrote this thing and he didn't have anything to do with the Iron Fist show. Not that I'm entirely convinced Chris Claremont in 2019 would have had much to contribute to the Iron Fist show, but nevertheless, his work in 1976 not only outplays the Iron Fist show, but does such a significantly better job on it, it's actually jaw-dropping. It does a better job at diversity and dealing with the fact that Danny Rand is very much a white man who this comic very much grew up in an Asian culture and ultimately adopted it. The comic does a good job at still featuring Asian characters around Danny Rand, from Bao, who's very much an interesting character. He used to be an army ranger and now he's just a citizen in New York who wants to see his community bettered. And that puts him at odds with his own brother who's heading up a crime family. Asian characters in this comic have a lot of different roles they fill, and that makes this story a lot more sincere and stronger because of it. For a comic published in 1976, it is remarkably progressive, although that isn't really surprising by Marvel standards from this time period in general. Still, it's a great comic, and I would definitely recommend it. Mary Jane's appearance in here is small and short, but it is enjoyable, and there is something worth noting about it. They very casually drop the comment that the two are dating by now, relative to the 1973 Amazing Spider-Man issue we just reviewed, where Peter was still dealing with Gwen's death and they were just friends. Things have progressed, and it's still amazing how much can happen in such a short period of time in these 1960s and 1970s Spider-Man comics. Though this Iron Fist series wouldn't really be what ultimately rose Iron Fist to prominence, that was more the Heroes for Hire stuff, this was a great comic and does a really good job at telling the Iron Fist story. It's a little bit dated now in that I don't think Iron Fist technically had his childhood happen in 1961 like it outright states in this comic, but in so many other ways it's ahead of its time and does a better job than the most contemporary take of Iron Fist that most people have seen in the form of the show, and that part is amazing. So, if you want to understand what the show was going for a little better, I do recommend you go back and check out these original Iron Fist comics. They're available in re-release, like all the comics we've reviewed so far for this random reviews series we've done for Mary Jane, which also means that the artwork's been touched up really nicely, and it shows in the comic overall. And that's about it for this comic. I did quite enjoy it, but now we're gonna move on. And while we've only been stepping forward a few years at a time so far in this series, next up is our big jump, the biggest jump in time throughout all of these random reviews, because of course the interval between each issue and when they were published is going to vary randomly. And we're going to be jumping ahead by a grand total of 14 years, straight past the 80s and into the 1990s. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm curious what's going to happen next, and hope you guys will join me for that little adventure. Thanks for watching, and if you like Comic Island, be sure to check out our Patreon page. And finally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.